It was more than just a vehicle, it was a statement. The 1969 Dodge Charger burnt rubber across the American psyche as it stood at the intersection of a cinematic explosion, a mechanical revolt, and a cultural revolution. Its long, muscular body, distinct lines, and unmistakable roar were symbols of rebellion as much as speed. Few people are aware that the Charger was much more than just a vehicle with horsepower, even though many people remember it for its roaring V8 and memorable appearances in Hollywood chase scenes. Wrapped in steel, chrome, and a raw attitude, the 1969 Charger was a reflection of its era, a symbol of engineering ambition, marketing brilliance, and youth unrest. The 1969 Charger, which was born during a time when America was being divided and reshaped, struck the streets like a blow to the face of mediocrity. The Vietnam War was in full swing. Protests for civil rights dominated the media. Additionally, young Americans yearned for something loud, unvarnished, and unapologetically strong, something that felt like freedom. The Charger comes in. However, the Charger wasn't made to blend in like the generic economy cars that clogged suburban driveways. It was designed to dominate in terms of appearance, sound, and spirituality. The designers at Dodge were aware that they were producing more than just a car. With its Coke bottle silhouette and concealed headlamps, the second-generation Charger, which debuted in 1968, had already caused a stir. However, the formula was refined with the 1969 update. Its aggressive face was further enhanced by a divided front grille. With its wide stance, fastback rear window, and flying buttress roofline, it resembled a jet fighter more than a family vehicle. This was intimidation on four wheels, not transportation. It demanded respect rather than requesting it. The Charger had a range of power plants underneath the exterior that could shake windows and frighten birds away from trees. The real legend started with the 383 Magnum, progressed to the 440 Magnum, and culminated with the now famous 426 Hemi, but the base 318 cubic inch V8 was reliable. Born from NASCAR, the Hemi was more than just an engine. It was a beast with 425 horsepower that sent shivers down your spine. It transformed the Charger from a street cruiser into a dominant force on the drag strip. And if the driver had the courage to handle it, the Charger could outmuscle anything in its path with options like the Track Pack or Super Track Pack, which added beefy tires, performance gears, and heavy-duty suspension. However, the 1969 Charger's place in American legend cannot be explained by its raw numbers and speed statistics. The car was elevated by its cultural impact or its capacity to transcend metal. The General Lee, a bright orange 1969 Dodge Charger with the number 01 on the doors and a rebel flag on the roof, became one of the most identifiable vehicles in television history when The Dukes of Hazzard debuted 10 years later. With a horn that played Dixie, it slid sideways around dirt roads, flew over police cruisers, and jumped rivers. Children loved it. Adults were envious. The Charger was suddenly more than just a vehicle. It was a hero. Hollywood wasn't finished. Steve McQueen's 1968 film, Bullet, had already cemented the Charger's predecessor into movie history with a chase sequence so intense it revolutionized the way action films were made, even before the 1969 Charger was available for purchase. However, the 69 model was the one that people remembered the most. It was the perfect car for a bad guy because of its sleeker body and meaner grille. It appeared to be dangerous, and it was. The Charger's commentary on the American dream, however, was what really set it apart, despite its extensive screen time and street cred. Feeling untouchable was more important than simply driving quickly. Having a Charger meant you didn't just keep up, you led, especially if it had a 440 or Hemi engine. It implied that everything could be left behind in a haze of rage and smoke. And feeling in control, even if only behind the wheel, was power in its purest form in a nation struggling with chaos, from war to civil unrest to petrol shortages. Additionally, the Charger violated marketing and design guidelines. It was marketed as a way of life, as well as a vehicle. It wasn't just clever copy when Dodge ran advertisements referring to it as the leader of the Dodge Rebellion. It perfectly conveyed the sensation of operating a vehicle that wasn't quiet, safe, or even typical. You didn't purchase a Charger in order to conserve fuel. You purchased it with the intention of burning it, and people burn it. Although handling in corners was always a little dubious, the Charger was a king on the straightaway due to its size, weight, and brute force. However, no one gave a damn. This vehicle was designed for the long, wide, and wild roads of America. Like a lion on the hunt, it thundered down highways. Additionally, the sound of its exhaust note was enough to give any driver a sense of immortality. However, the 1969 Dodge Charger stood out from the others due to something more subtle, more sentimental, than just its engine, design, and marketing. People purchased more than just this vehicle. They had dreams about the car. Die-cast models clutched in childhood hands, posters on the walls of teenage bedrooms, and hours spent watching it tear across TV screens forged a connection that statistics could never quantify. The Charger moved people, not just cars. It stood for freedom, strength, a revolt. At a time when everything around them seemed out of control, it gave regular Americans the appearance, no, the sense of control. The late 1960s were a fast-paced time, but it's easy to forget now. The country was rocked by assassinations. All around, protests broke out. The young-old generation gap widened into a chasm. In the midst of all of that, car culture evolved from a pastime to an identity. That identity was perfectly embodied by the Dodge Charger. It was the type of vehicle that was unconcerned with your political beliefs. It made no inquiries. When you turned the key, it simply growled and challenged you to go beyond your comfort zone. Young men returning from Vietnam took a particular liking to the Charger. After seeing the worst humanity had to offer, soldiers returned seeking a sense of revivification. Something innate, a loud sound. That call was answered by the Charger. For many of these men, it evolved into mobile therapy rather than merely a means of transportation. No doctor could recommend the kind of release that came from speeding down deserted roads while the only sounds were the roar of a V8 and the wind in your face. Despite its strength and cultural significance, the 1969 Charger had flaws. It was flawed, seriously flawed. It had a suspension that made sharp turns risky, it was heavy, and it was fuel-hungry. However, rather than diminishing its legacy, those flaws made it stronger. Since authentic icons aren't flawless, they stick in your memory. Furthermore, the Charger was unforgettable due to its unreserved swagger and brute force charm. It also didn't hurt that it came at the ideal time, right before everything was going to change. Crackdowns on insurance, oil crises, and new regulations all occurred in the early 1970s. The muscle car heyday came to an end almost as fast as it started. The majority of the legends had either vanished or been completely neutered by 1975. However, the 1969 Dodge Charger was stuck in a rut, a tribute to the past, to what would never be again. That added to its specialness. Collectors today are enamored with the 1969 Charger for more reasons than just its scarcity. Well-restored examples are the focal point of any classic car show, and original models with matching numbers can sell for six figures. Though purists know the soul resides in the original, the modern Charger, reborn as a four-door performance sedan, wears the nameplate. That low, long body, that hostile grille, that madness of rear-wheel drive and burning rubber at a red light. That is the actual Charger. Even after all these years, the car is still defined by its stories. Everybody has one. Perhaps your uncle had one and wouldn't sell it. Or when, following a street race, you witnessed one vanish into the night. Even if you were only exposed to it through television and films, it still had an impact. That is the legend's power. That is the 1969 Dodge Charger's power. You were performing when you drove a Charger, particularly one with a 440 or a Hemi. Each stoplight turned into a stage. Every on-ramp on the highway serves as a launch pad. People felt you coming, not just heard it. The earth would rumble. There would be vibrations in the air. People would turn. You were the star of your own film for that 1 second, not just another driver. Let's also discuss that sound. The dual exhaust's deep, throaty growl was more than just noise. It was music, an internal combustion symphony. The Charger had a pounce-ready sound even when it was idle. When you flipped the throttle, it screamed instead of whispering. Brash, arrogant, and full of attitude. In a Charger, you couldn't ambush anyone. However, why would you wish to? On the inside, it was purpose rather than luxury. The dashboard was designed with the driver in mind. Knobs, switches, and gauges designed to make you feel more like a pilot than a passenger. The long hood resembled a runway as it extended in front of you. When things got crazy, the seats held you in place by hugging you, not for comfort. It wasn't a cozy interior. You were dared. Go faster, it whispered. The 1969 Charger's ability to endure, not just in garages and auto shows, but also in people's minds, may be its most amazing feature. It has been honored in films, revived in video games, and given new life in contemporary engineering. Furthermore, the Charger only gets stronger with age, whereas some vehicles become obsolete. More recognizable, more preferred, more legendary, for it was never merely a muscle car. It was a declaration. One of the memories. A myth. Please remember to hit the like button, share this video with other car enthusiasts, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of automotive history if you liked this trip into the heart of one of America's most iconic muscle cars. Do you have a Dodge Charger story? We would be delighted to hear it if you could leave a comment. We appreciate your time and hope to see you on the next trip down memory lane.